Thank you to Into the AM for partnering up with me for this video. Into the AM is a great clothing brand that makes very cool and really comfortable t-shirts that have great, awesome logo designs on them. And if you hop down into the description, you can get 10% off on any purchases made by you on any of these amazing graphic t-shirts, including their 3 for $62 bundle deal. So that's 62 for 3 and 10% off using my link in the description. Thank you again to Into the AM for partnering up with me, and let's move on to the video. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Actual Story of Actual Play. It is your host, as always, Jake, and today with me I have Saffron from Midnight Ceremonies Media. Hello!
Hello! Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. It's great that we were able to set this up despite the time difference and all that.
Yeah, I'm used to working, remote. Our team is across the country, and sometimes, that means also coordinating with people in other countries.
Yeah, I'm glad. So, Saffron, you are the creative director of Midnight Ceremonies Media. Can you tell me about how that whole project came into being? What's the initial spark that made you realize this project was actually a thing that could happen?
Yeah. So, I have a filmmaker background, lots of short films, small projects, but I also enjoy playing various TTRPGs, and I got really into Monster Hearts specifically, and summer of 2021, I was like, I want to play a game, of Monster Hearts. Is anyone interested? Found an amazing group of players, of friends online, and it was gonna be a home game. But I was like, these people are so talented, and I want to get into making things, like getting more stuff on my portfolio. So I pitched turning it into a podcast, and because I was kind of the one spearheading the let's do this production, let's make this kind of a legit studio, and not just a group of friends, but though we are a group of friends working together, that ended up with me the role of creative director, which I never expected to become a creative director before I even graduated, undergrad. But yeah,
Well done.
yeah, thank you. It's so what that actually means now is that I kind of am the one thinking about the creative aspect of what we want to produce, and thinking of new stories, new we had the Carmel Chronicles, which I was the GM of, and then the Valkyrie Cycle, Catherine was the GM of, and so it was their concept, but I helped kind of direct, and we were co-directors to kind of help guide that story together, and then just also doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes of editing and helping with promotion. But yeah, we're right now kind of in this in-between space of trying to figure out okay, where are we going next? And I have a lot of ideas and I'm very thankful and grateful to have Casey Fleming, who's the producer, the logistics to my creative brain, and is kind of the other executive that we have right now, getting things made.
Left brain, right brain, yeah. It's
yes.
fantastic. So you mentioned that you're still doing your graduate program, and
Oh yeah, so I graduated 2022. So
congrats.
I'm not currently in school, but I was still in school when making
the
Cromwell
program was
Chronicles.
fun. I see.
Yeah.
Because what I mentioned or noticed when I was listening to, because I had the pleasure of listening to the first 3 episodes of the Valkyrie Chronicles, or Cycle,
The Valkyrie
sorry.
Cycle. Yeah.
Messing it.
They're similar names. It's easy to get them confused.
Yeah, the Valkyrie Cycle. And I just mentioned, like, wow, it sounds like these people know what it's like to go to high school in the US.
Yes.
It sounds like there's, actual, not current, but recent experience here.
Yeah.
Which I feel like brought a lot to me as a listener, in Scandinavia and Denmark, right, who has no real life experience with American high school. So it to me it was like, oh, okay, yeah, well, this sounds like it is how it works. It felt very realistic.
That's really good to hear, because that's something that I think makes us a little bit different, and I think that's important about like our storytelling, is that there is an authenticity to the experiences. There's, not to say that someone who's in their like 30s could be telling a story about high schoolers, but we have that kind of recent experience to draw from. Everyone are, as it says on our website, we're like a couple years removed from like the ages of these characters that we've played. And maybe as, then we all start graduating college, maybe we'll start telling stories about college students. But yeah, I liked that kind of the differences in the 2 high school experiences we have between the Cromwell Chronicles and the Valkyrie Cycle as well, since I did not go to public school. So the Cromwell Chronicles, the world that I created, is like this independent like arts high school, which is closer to my experience. And then in the Valkyrie Cycle with Catherine GMing, it was like, okay, this is this big public school in a smaller town, not in the city. And
Yes, absolutely. Now, how do you? So you have this experience of actually, being only a little removed from the lives of these people, except their magic. So how do you balance the challenges of emotions of like a late high school life with the supernatural elements that Monster Hearts, is built around?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think that balance comes from the genius of the game Monster Hearts and Avery Alder's game design, because the supernatural is real. In these worlds, it's like there are werewolves, there are monster hunters, there are witches. But that is also kind of a metaphor for all of the stuff you're dealing with in high school. All of the extreme emotion, all this awkwardness, all this anxiety and tension that gets translated into supernatural identities. And that's also where like queer identities can get translated into the supernatural as well.
Absolutely.
So for me, like playing Stephanie Chaplin, who's this witch, like it's just like every, insecurity, every like bit of self-doubt. So yeah, I turn like, for Stephanie Chaplin, who's this witch, I turn every little insecurity up to 11, and then the fact that she has magic is a way to kind of like make that even more extreme.
Yes.
So the like base experience
Mm-hmm.
is real. Like Stephanie Chaplin is a character who is dealing with a lot of like internalized homophobia and insecurities. You know, I had hints of that. I never do the things that she does with her magic, but I part of, you know, playing
What? You don't magically force people to tell the truth and give them migraines?
Oh, I wish. Well, not the migraines part. So yeah, it's I just find the system really fun
Yeah.
because of that. It's also, I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and very much draws from like early Buffy in that, where like, you know, that was like high school as hell. Everything that, you know, you could experience in high school becomes a metaphor using the supernatural.
For sure. I mean, you already slammed two of the questions right there in one explanation. Fantastic. Because I was wondering specifically about this Monster Hearts framework, about the ability to enhance this like messy emotion and character conflict of the teenage drama. So you already knocked that out of the park. In terms of something you mentioned, which was this queer identity focus, it's very clear to me as a viewer and as a researcher when I look into your work. It's very clear that the team is dedicated to telling stories that reflect your own queer identities. So what I want to know is like, how do you navigate telling these stories that are so personal and so like specific in a way? How do you navigate telling these stories in the broader sense of like, well, we need to make sure that people can relate, that people can, you know, find some sort of relatability in our work, but still maintain that authenticity?
Oh, this is a good question. I think one of the things that we do is that we know our stories not necessarily for everyone. We are definitely telling the story, and we're trying to like share it with people who are like us and want to see aspects of their identity, because like I'm not interested in telling a queer story for a straight audience. I'm telling a queer story for a queer audience. And I do think hopefully everyone can find aspects that they relate to. And I think one of the things that helps is that we have, for our two, seasons, we've had like these big casts with lots of characters, and so all these characters are very different, and so maybe some aspect of this character is going to resonate with someone, but I mean, I definitely like, I'm telling this story of queer youth for also a queer audience and a queer young adult audience.
How do you hope that these stories will impact your audience when you're specifically going for an audience who resonates with these queer identities? How do you, as a storyteller, hope to impact this audience?
I mean, for me, I think storytelling to me is all about connection, and hopefully, making people feel a little less alone, and also making people feel seen. Because I know for me, growing up, like there's been times where I'm like, oh, I wish I saw like this specific struggle that I have in media. Like with Stephanie Chaplin, I can't really think of many stories where it's a queer woman who is like not dealing with homophobia from her family, her friends, or even really the like world around her. It's like societal pressures in general, and like very like internal, and it's something that is like it's very nuanced that I don't think I've really seen in other media. I can project it into other media, but for the most part, like I've not seen that. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to tell this story. And, I hope that someone else might, listening to the podcast go, oh, I see that. Like, I relate to that in some small way.
She's just like me for real,
Yes. If someone did that to Stephanie Chaplin, I mean, I'm so sorry, but also, like...
I thought you were going to say I haven't seen any stories about girls struggling with being a witch, and I was like, boy, do I have the book series for you. But...
Oh, yes. No, I know there's many stories of struggling with being a witch, though Stephanie doesn't really struggle with being a witch. She struggles with, like, the reality of being a witch.
She struggles with being a... No.
No, say that.
Me? Cut that out.
I love her. She is my baby because I made her, but also she is an awful person, and I understand if people don't like her. Truly, I do.
I thought she was great in the content that I've consumed so far. So far, I mainly relate to Lucian, which is, problematic.
Yes. Well, you know what, Lucian,
he's baby girl. What can I say?
He is baby girl. I love Lucian so much. I love all of the characters.
Yes, everyone go watch the goddamn show, all right? It's great. It's fantastic. So, getting back on track because I've derailed us. How do you, so with this focus on queer identity and inclusivity and portraying authentic character experiences, how do you as a director, ensure that the character's experience are portrayed authentically and respectfully through the players?
So, one trick that we've done for our podcasts so far is not really beginning the editing production process until we've finished playing through the season. And so
that's interesting.
For now, we've only produced 2 shows. There's a chance that might change in the future. I've also thought how do you produce something with a live stream? I've never done that. But for these 2 shows, it's been okay, we're gonna play through the season, so we know what the character arc and kind of the end of the story is once we are starting the process of editing at the beginning. And I think that helps kind of ensure that we're telling a focused story. There are bits or little pieces of world building that will be, when we're playing, that'll get sprinkled in, and it's fun in the moment, or because we doing characters riffing back and forth, or it's an interesting thing that we're ooh, let's drop this in here and maybe it'll go somewhere. But then if we get to the end of the season, it's oh, that didn't actually go anywhere, let's cut that out, even though it was enjoyable for us playing it, but cut it out because we don't want it to distract from the main storyline. And another way that as a director, I want to go okay, are these character arcs being honored, is talking to the players, because the players know their characters best.
Yes.
And so there's some of the editing team for the Valkyrie cycle are also players. And so there's also sometimes where it's okay, do you want to edit that episode because you have a big scene with your character? Okay, you're going to edit that episode because you're going to know how to handle it. But then there's other times where it's oh, I've come you know, like I was editing an episode with this scene that I was like, I know this is a really significant scene for these two characters. I'm going to talk to the actors, be like, you know, is there specific stuff you want me to include? Do you want, or like cut out? I think that those are the main things that we've done. And also just like, I think, yeah, I don't know, trusting the players / actors, because to me that's like, we're wanting to tell a story, and hopefully, you know, all of the themes of these different characters are going to interconnect and be a cohesive thing. But that's going to come about in the playing, and then for me, I see then the production and the directing and the editing as the second step. The first step is the GM, and the GM brings all the themes together, and then the second step is the director, and the director is like, okay, we've got all of this stuff that we did together and it's recorded. How do we just make that the best it can be? And, you know, that also means overseeing sound design and like, you know, thinking about like music. And we have some great composers who have worked with us. And
so you've composed music specifically for the show?
Yes. So we have two composers for the Valkyrie Cycle, Haley Adams and Quinn Borazin. Quinn's also a player who plays Eden Grace. And yeah, so they kind of came up together. We like, you know, had some like, okay, here's some possible inspo. You know, Valkyrie Cycle is Norse mythology themed. And so it's like, oh, maybe drawing some, you know, inspo from that. And so they collaborated to do we have a theme song that's original theme music, and then we also have these little bits of score, like these little like kind of motifs that we have running throughout that are the series that are kind of changed and evolve over the course of the series. I don't want to. I'll say this because I don't think I've actually talked about it in an interview before. The kind of two motifs that we have running through are the chains motif and the breaking chains motif. So just leaving that out there if people want to like listen super hard and try to, you know, piece together like
building on that, is there a specific reason that you don't use background music throughout the whole like show and mainly use these motifs and theme songs? Is there a reason for that?
There's two reasons. One, it's easier not to be like compose a bunch of music. It's just like, let's just compose little bits of music to have in specific places. But two, the other thing is that in terms of sound design, I actually draw a lot of my inspiration is drawn from like narrative fiction and like radio plays and not classic actual plays. So
interesting.
For my concept for like the kind of what I advise as a director for scenes and like the audio design of scenes is to treat scenes like they are like an audio play, like add to environmental background noise, like if there's effects that are going to have specific, you know, sounds to it, add to that. But and then there's kind of the other world of like us talking, and you know, we gotta always have a dice roll in there because that's part of the whole appeal of actual play. But I want the tension to come from the story and not from just like a building crescendo of music, because we also don't really have like, well, not to give too much away, we have some combat in the Valkyrie cycle, but not as much as like say like a traditional Dungeons and Dragons
Right.
actual. And so
because I felt like
we
the
might add.
silence did a lot actually for the
Oh, good.
tension.
What scene? You said the silence,
No,
or
just
in
in
general?
Just in general, I felt like as a I keep saying viewer, listener, I guess is the right term. But as a listener of when I was doing my research, like certain scenes where a character would like talk, and then there would be a couple seconds of silence before the next person talked. It was like, oh shit, are they gonna talk back? Are they gonna hit them? Are they gonna like, the just a brief moment for me, the viewer, to swallow what just happened before it gets right back into the next thing. I feel like actually has a lot of impact.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it is like, again, my film background and like doing that kind of editing. I'm like, ooh, I try to have a bit of room tone or a bit of like some little bit of ambience for specific locations, so it doesn't like people aren't listening and going like, what did my audio just cut out? But I'm glad that then that like pace, the pacing of it is it's tricky. It's tricky to get.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So finishing up on the queer aspects, or at least in terms of my pre-prepared questions. In the recent years, especially as actual play has boomed more so than ever before, we have seen a huge increased visibility of queer characters and queer narratives. How do you think that the actual play genre has generally contributed to the overall media representation of queer people? Because I think it's a lot.
Oh, that is a great question that someone could do probably like a whole book on.
Well, get writing. No, just kidding.
Yeah, there's so many theories that I kind of have bubbling around. One is that I don't know. I think like nerdy people tend to also be like relate to. I'm trying to choose my words carefully because there's a kind of nerdy person who is like cishet white, like typical person, or like normative, not typical, but like a societal normative ideal. But I also think that there is like a lot of community in kind of otherness or being like just not part of the normative, culture, society that is also just like in nerdy queer, like not queer interests, but like TTRPGs, just like,
yes.
I think maybe one thing that draws people in is that you can be anyone.
Yes.
Like you can create kind of any character, and
you can be exactly who you want to be, which
and
it's not always the case in real life.
Yeah, and there's like a lot of games that really just encourage exploration of identity. I mean, Monster Hearts is like that to me, and I think I am honestly like surprised that there aren't more like people playing Monster Hearts, but or even like just Powered by the Apocalypse games in general. I know that there's a fair amount of variety in the different Powered by the Apocalypse games, but I really like that kind of system or like rule set. Yeah, I also want to briefly shout out the Baker family who helped design Apocalypse World, who then is inspired the Powered by the Apocalypse. They're going, they're having health stuff right now, so I want to make sure to drop the link to fundraiser.
Because TTRPGs have such a larger queer space group than most hobbies, I fear that it's like seen by some people as just that, which if you understand what I'm saying, it's difficult to word exactly what I'm saying, because basically yeah.
Like, are you saying that it's like you don't just want to be known as like
I don't want
queer?
I don't want
it to be known as like you want it to be known for the creativity of the TTRPG, and
yes,
not just
I want TTRPGs to be, hey, come here because it's a space where anyone can be and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Rather than, hey, come here, we're queer safe. Which, obviously being queer safe is a great thing, and we need more spaces. But I don't think this needs to be a specific space for that. I think this can just be a space that everyone can be in. If that makes sense.
I think that it's
hard to say without getting
industry. This is another thing that I think is kind of complicated, and I've learned about, is that there isn't one TTRPG or actual play community.
Right.
There are small groups, there's communities, but it's an industry, and that
there's
doesn't
not
mean
one
that
film community. There's not one song community.
Exactly. That's a really good.
It's an art
really good comparison, because it is a medium, so.
But that's exactly what I mean, right? That's exactly my point. Is that you wouldn't say listen to music because it's gay. You would say man, I love listening to music, and it's great that these queer artists can also perform their incredible music, right?
I relate to. I mean, I sometimes introduce myself in various circles as oh yeah, I'm a queer woman, I'm pansexual.
Mm-hmm.
Those are important to me, and they very much inform how I live this world and the stories I tell. But that's not all I want to be known for. I want to be known for the specifics of my story, and so that is something that is complicated in the marketing of Midnight Ceremonies media, where it's okay, people who want to see authentic queer stories, you should come see our stuff. That's a catchy tagline. That's not really what the story's all about. It is, kind of, but really it's about, a very specific aspect of, also saving the world,
please come watch our story. It's about this very intricate development of character identities and relationships between characters. Also, everyone's queer, but please, the first thing is the important.
Yes,
but yes,
yeah. And then also, if we're talking about queerness in the TTRPG space, I do have to shout out the Rainbow Roll Network, which is the podcast. Well, actually, it's actual play network, because there's live streams and podcasts that the Valkyrie Cycle is a part of. It's basically it's an event-based network, which is a little kind of unique and cool. But the way that this network helps promo its shows is through events, and that is a community, and it's bringing people together in a Discord space and through events and stuff to be hey, let's all collaborate together. Let's share advice and kind of be mentors for each other. And that has been really, really wonderful. And it's also just kind of like we have like it's like rainbow, and it's like the slogan is our stories, our voices, and so it's very much hand in hand with Midnight Ceremonies values, but it's also like it's not just like that kind of queerness as an identity is what like brings people together, but that's not the point of the community. It's how any community is going to interact. It's like, support.
Your cast and crew, as you mentioned, are spread across the whole country in like different time zones and stuff. So how does your like geographic diversity impact your recording and editing and like creation process essentially?
It doesn't. It does, because like we have to make sure that we write down all the different time zones for like when we have a meeting, but it's about as difficult, I think, as like any RPG group scheduling is. People's lives are busy, and
which is terrible, as we all know.
But in some ways it's a little bit more freeing that you don't all have to like get to the same location together. You just have to hop on a Discord call. Yes. And I think that there are advantages and disadvantages to playing online versus playing in person. There is something incredibly special about actually getting to play in person together.
Yes.
And the thing is, though, unless you have a very nice studio with a lot of nice mics, it's a lot easier to record remotely than in person.
Yeah.
So
I mean, just look at, the biggest actual play in the world, Critical Role. Look at the first, 60 episodes and how many tech issues there were, and like microphone issues and like that.
There is more control to be like, okay, we are, each have our little mic and we're in our little box and we have our little, individual stream. Like, I would love to be able to have more experience with in-person recording. I'm so, personally, I am so invested in this medium of actual play. I think there's so much potential and it's so interesting. And I would love to get experience with other kinds of production for it, because all I've done is the online remote stuff. But a lot of people have done that, and a lot of people are making it work. And, there's award-winning streams that they're also across the country, and I think it's
for sure
that's also kind of amazing that you can, I mean, we're having a conversation right now in totally different types of countries, and
I'm incredibly blessed as well, because if I if this online space wasn't as prevalent as it would, I wouldn't get to talk about actual play with all these amazing people from different countries. I haven't done a single one of these in person because that would be horrible.
Yeah.
Because you have to invite someone into my tiny apartment and sit next to them, or build a studio, which I can behind the scenes tell you I do not have the money for.
Yeah.
So it's incredible, how this industry has blossomed through the internet, and I feel like that ties back into this whole idea that we've talked about throughout this interview about community, about interconnectivity, because the internet, as terrible as it might be sometimes, really allows us to find communities, really allows us to connect with the people who are just like us.
Yes.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, so I did a short film for during my studies at Smith that I called Connected about online. And I think connected or connect or connection is honestly one of the best words, because it's not necessarily positive. It's just a bond. It's a way to get connected, you know?
Yeah.
And we can find positive connections. We can find ones that empower us. And yes, the internet also can connect us to stories that are really draining, or people who are not kind and are harassing, and there's just it's connecting people. And throughout my experience, you know, in this space, and as I'm trying to learn more, it's finding the people who those connections make me feel empowered and excited and ready to create. And that's what I focus on, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer. So can you, just because I found it so fascinating when you brought it up, can you elaborate just a little bit about how Monster Hearts element of magic and fantasy enhances the human experience? How, like, the magical elements highlight and shed light upon human emotion and, like, what people go through.
Ooh. I'm going to talk about the game specifically, and the game design, rather than specific examples from. Maybe I'll start pulling specific examples from the two shows, but I feel like, so confession, I have GM'd a lot more Monster Hearts than played it. I have played Stephanie Chaplin, and then I've played in one shot with some friends. So most of my thoughts on Monster Hearts actually comes from being a GM. And yeah, I just think that each skin, or the playbooks, it's written such that here's a archetypal monster and it embodies a certain kind of relationship, or just like that relationship might not be with other people, but like an internal relationship. And say like the infernal, you know, it's like, oh, you've made this pact with some powerful being, and it's about like toxic codependent relationships, you know. So I've been a GM to a game with an infernal, and it's like this devil figure and it's super powerful. But I've also played in this one shot where it was like, it's could be a devil person, or it might just be like someone who's like an evil talent manager. It was kind of murky, you know. And so like you can be as supernatural and magical as you want. You can actually be incredibly human. Like I think it says in the vampire playbook that it's like, yeah, you could be a blood-sucking vampire. You could also just be like a toxic boyfriend. And like it's about like your feeding is more just like about vibes. If you, I guess, if
you're sucking the life out of this person.
Well, yeah, it's like the you know TV show What We Do in the Shadows. There's an energy vampire. Like you could play an energy vampire.
Oh my god! Amazing reference. 10 points to you.
And so how that actually, you know, like what that means for storytellers and for people like engaging with the story is, I mean, it's like any speculative fiction. Having a layer of abstraction to it makes it easier for people to relate in some way. Because if it's like, oh, this is like a realistic YA, or not even YA, like adult novel about like, this is the real world. Like, people might relate to that, but it might also just be like, it's harder sometimes to connect to themes if it's like every day. If it's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, sci-fi or fantasy, and it's just a little bit like, everything's a little bit different, you're going to be able to notice the similarities more, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's why we have this trend, or maybe not so much these days because it's been done a billion times, but you know, back in my day, or when all these young adult novels were coming out, right, like the Harry Potter books, the Percy Jacksons, the Hunger Games, the Divergents, the etc., right, they were all about the same thing, right? They were all about a person discovering their uniqueness in a world of, you know, where they had to do something. and like, yeah, you could have made the same story about like, yeah, Katniss is a insurance salesman who really needs to get their monthly quota, but it's much more fun and much more engaging if they need to save the world through archery or whatever.
Yeah.
And the theme can still remain whole, and the theme can still resonate, even though the actual actions are different.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Can you just briefly go over your, like, because you mentioned you like give out the editing process in between your people. So could you explain sort of like, so does each person edit differently, or do you try to go for a style collectively, or like how does that work?
Yeah. So, it's the different, okay, the what we do now, what we do for the Valkyrie cycle, and we're going to continue to do for any future projects, is having editors and sound design. And for both, I kind of like go, okay, you know, here are some guidelines, here are some things that like I think, you know, practices that people should follow. So like what I was describing earlier of you know, when to do sound design, what kind of sound design, and also like what to cut out. Like, you know, we thinking about like the arc of the story, like, okay, you know, cut out mentions of these things, or cut out, you know, jokes that go on too long, or cut out long pauses, and like that kind of like style is established, and then people take an episode and then they edit it, and sometimes also like the sound designer for the episode will be the same person, but sometimes it's also split up to editor and then sound design. And there's definitely people who like maybe have a slightly different style than other people, but because it's like all the same story. And then also the other thing, a role as a director is we do kind of listen throughs. Like once an episode is done, you're listening through it and go like, and we'll make those little fine, like we share Reaper. We use like the editing software Reaper, and like we'll share those files. So like an editor, like I open it up and I'm like, as a director, I'll like, oh, I'm doing a listen through, and then I go, oh, okay, this is one little thing that I want to change, and so we like, you know, I'll change that. So I think it kind of makes a consistent tone and style throughout. The other thing that also we did for the Valkyrie cycle before, you know, we even really started editing, is we made like a database of like, okay, here are the sounds we're gonna draw from, you know, and like here's a list of like, here's a big credits document that like if somehow someone forgets to download a sound, or like they download a new sound and they don't upload it to this folder, like someone else can like find the same link and download it. So like sound effects are consistent throughout, and that's another thing that like adds to the consistent style. So I did edit like did the actual editing and sound design of individual episodes of Valkyrie cycle, but I also like as a director, I had my hands on a lot of episodes just because I was kind of like doing that final listen through and like doing small tweaks and things.
Absolutely. How would you say the podcast and the team has evolved creatively, and how do you see yourself continuing to evolve in the future?
I think one way we've evolved is like, I think that as we've gotten more experience working together, there is like, not to say that we didn't trust each other before, but I think that there is the more we work together, the easier it is to rely on each other and to be like, you know, I know now to be like, okay, I'm working on this. Oh, I said I was going to do the sound design, but I'm having trouble figuring out what exactly I want to do. So I can be like, hey, Casey, you're good at sound design. Would you be able to like help listen to this part? Or like, we're all just like more confident in giving, I think, each other notes and advice and collaborating. I think when we first started out, it was a little bit, when we first started doing the Cromwell Chronicles, I was like, oh, I'll edit stuff. I'll do all the editing. And that didn't come from like selfishness, I think. It came from like, I knew it was a lot of work and I wanted to be like, oh, let me handle it. I'll know it's a lot of work. I can handle it. I don't want to give other people a lot of work. But no, like, this is a team of people who want to collaborate together and want to be working on this project. And so as time has gone on, I know that I can rely on these people and they can rely on me, if they're like, oh, I actually can't finish this episode. I'm like, okay, I got it. And one thing that we're doing moving forward is being more clear that there is like permanent staff and seasonal staff. So that's we've kind of had like everyone's been working on each season, like anyone who wants to work on a season, we're working on that season together. You're part of the team. And it's been great. I've loved, we've had such great teams for the Cromwell Chronicles, and then we got even more people to help out with the Valkyrie cycle. And going forward, as I have all these ideas of try to like do new stuff, and maybe we want to experiment with live streaming. I don't know. Like we don't know. We don't know. It's open ended. That Casey and I were talking like, okay, let's ask people who've worked with us so far. Do you want to just like work season to season, or let's get some people who are like, you're on the team, you're kind of ready to go whenever. And we all can rely on each other, but also if people are seasonal, that's a little less stress, I guess, because it's like, okay, you're working on the Valkyrie cycle, that's your project. So we are, I don't know when exactly this will be coming out, but we are looking for a director of communications and trying to recruit more publicity staff to join our team, because as like a permanent staff, because we realized that we were doing a lot of like publicity, marketing, communication stuff, and seeing that as kind of like a season to season thing. And as like we're researching and understanding like how other like podcast studios do it, it's like they're always promoting their stuff even after the season is over. And so looking for we're looking for people who want to join. So if anyone listens to this interview and you're like, oh, I really resonate what you're saying about like authentic stories and collaboration and community, then there'll be that information on our social medias, Midnight Sea Media, and then
which will all be in the description. Yes.
Yeah.
Incredible. So as you continue expanding and creating, are there any particular specific themes or character arcs that you're excited to explore that you haven't gotten the chance to yet?
Hmm. That's a really interesting question, because for me, I have, many kinds of stories and themes that I like telling, but to me, like, themes often come or go hand in hand with genre. And I so there's some uh other games besides Monster Hearts that I'm like, ooh, I'm interested in playing. And to me, the way I also see actual play is that, finding a game, deciding what kind of genre and story you want to tell, then you find a game for that. I am not into the let's just homebrew D&D. Everyone has their own preferences, but for me, I'm like, I want to look at indie games. And so there are, some
Yes.
genres and themes that I'm kind of like, ooh, I'm interested in that. Maybe doing like a superhero with masks, or maybe apocalyptic stuff. There's many, apocalyptic games. And so that has some interest. But the other thing that it's hard to kind of really say oh, I want to explore this, because another thing with TTRPG is so collaborative, and so many stuff just comes from working with other people. And so I can't really say what the future will hold in terms of themes, because that'll come from whoever my next collaborators are. And so with the team who have done Carmel Chronicles and Midnight Ceremonies Media, I think themes that we as a group are interested in telling I think there's some interest in telling stories about, I'm trying to figure out how to word this, stories about people who are messed up or mean or angry at the world, who are able to find love and comfort with each other still. I think that seems to be maybe a theme with both of our stories. And so I think that'll probably be a theme that will continue to emerge from other stories we tell together, is
which
people...
I feel is kind of a theme for almost all of TTRPGs.
Yeah. That might be because
found family,
yeah, well, it's not even found family necessarily. It's
not always, but the camaraderie aspect, I suppose.
Yeah. And I think my theory of why that's the case is because that reflects the group telling that story, especially with our group. We came together and started playing games and telling stories together, and so it's we're also interested in telling stories of people finding each other and finding something and finding connection out of with people you might not expect.
Yes, amazing. Yeah, that actually concludes my prepared questions and all of the stuff that I have prepared. Is there anything that you feel like we haven't talked about that you would like to talk about?
Gosh, I don't... Oh, okay. One note that I have.
Yes, please.
Another thing that could be in the description, the Valkyrie Cycle got selected into some festivals, which is very exciting.
Awesome.
And I will also be going to the Baltimore Next Media Festival, since that is the one in the States festival we got selected into. And so we are doing some fundraising on our Ko-fi to help kind of cover the costs of that, because we are an independent studio, not professional at all. And so we'll have some stuff up for sale there. One that I don't think anyone's grabbed yet is we have the option for commissioned personalized messages, in character messages.
Mm.
So if someone listens to the podcast and really, likes a specific character, that's a really fun thing to try to grab. And yeah, I also think in saying that, I want to extend out, if anyone who is also like a creator of APs, who is listening to this interview, like, there are so many cool opportunities with festivals and getting your work out there and getting some accolades from that. It has been really, I learned about it from the Rainbow Roll Network after we joined, and we also have the Rainbow Roll Fest, which will be next year, and each June we have that, and it's just like, I think it's a really, like, I knew about festivals from film class, and
Right.
and submitting short films to film festivals, and there are those same kind of opportunities for actual play, which I think is so cool. And as I said, it's all about that connection and community, and
Oh yeah.
also it's nice to have some praise.
So, where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Yes. So I am Saffron Heftegaub at Gaubhefta, GAUBHEFTA. Honestly, everywhere. I use Twitter. It's Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm also on Instagram, though I don't post as much there. And yeah, it's I love talking about this stuff. So if anyone wants to find me and just be like, opinions about actual play, or like, oh, I want to talk about like, honestly, anything related to like TTRPGs, I love hearing it. And so
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in that case, I think that wraps it up for the show. I thank you so much for coming on. It's a real pleasure to sit
Thank you
and
again for
geek
having
out.
me. Yes, this was so much fun.
So much fun. Yeah, I mean, every time I do the show, I'm so blessed by the opportunity to be able to talk to all of these interesting people. And yeah, I mean, I hope we can stay in touch after this and talk about actual play